Hey, welcome to the channel. We hope that you enjoy today's stories and check out the chapters on the video to see all the stories for today. But before we get into this video, subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon to get notified when we release a new video. So let's get into the video.
It all started with 3 knocks. There were some replies left on a comment I made on a previous post asking for the rest of the story. Here is my full-length experience in the house, which happened over the course of about a year. For some backstory, I moved in with my ex-boyfriend at his parents' house when we were 17. I'd known him since kindergarten and was aware of his night terrors for at least 5 years. I believe they may have gone on for as long as they lived in the house, though I'm not sure how old he was when they moved in. I didn't know much about night terrors and didn't know anyone else who had them. He didn't want to talk a lot about it, so I never pressed. When I noticed him having one, I just saw how he would breathe heavily for a few seconds to minutes and wake in a bad mood. I would best describe the mood as withdrawn and irritable and would take a few minutes to level out in order to be approachable. The night terrors caused him to have severe insomnia, and he would only sleep every few hours over the course of days. I had been living there for a few months and never had any feelings of unease, which is very odd since I'm unusually sensitive to energy shifts from previous experiences. Some days, I would wake up and go into the kitchen to see open cabinets or drawers. I thought nothing of this and figured someone left them open after a midnight snack. One morning, I jokingly mentioned how someone keeps forgetting to close the cabinets to his mom, and she replies with,
"Yeah, that's just the shadow people."
as if it was something she just casually forgot to mention.
They do that all the time.
Followed by telling me that she and her husband both have seen them in different areas of the house on multiple occasions. But, since I hadn't experienced anything there myself, I just laughed it off. At this time, our bed was against the inside wall of the house beside the door from the hallway. My ex liked to play a joke on me when I would leave the room, where he would reach over to hold the door handle so it wouldn't turn when I would try to get in. Harmless fun, no big deal, and we both thought it was funny. One bright weekend, I thought it would be good to do some spring cleaning and rearrange the bedroom furniture. I opened the windows to let in some cool breeze, cleaned the carpet, pushed the bed against the outside wall next to a window, and pulled the TV stand to the foot of the bed. After my ex came home, we ate and took turns having showers. When I went to open the door to the bedroom, the handle didn't turn. I chuckled since I was used to him playing that game. Only this time, when I went to turn the handle again, it still didn't budge. I thought he's probably wanting to play a little more than usual, so I tried twisting the handle back and forth multiple times, but it stayed stationary. When the latch finally released, I pushed the door open with such force that I stumbled into the room only to see my ex playing Xbox with his headset on, sitting 15 feet away from the door and wondering why it looked like I just fell in. That was the first time I felt like something could be in the house. It fell when the knocks first started. We'd been having some strong winds accompanied by cold rain. There was only one other house that shared the dead-end road to the top of the hill where we lived. It was late in the evening, the rain knocked the satellite out, so we got out some DVDs and put on a movie. We both heard scratches on the walls from the shrubs and tree leaves hitting the siding and windows. Then, 3 faint knocks came from the wall to the right of the bed. This was an exterior wall at the front of the house, so we decided it was from the wind. Some minutes passed when we heard 3 more knocks come from the wall next to the closet, an interior wall with a large, shared dresser along it. We decided to recreate the sound by knocking on the wall behind us, just to confirm the noise we heard. Less than a minute later, 3 clear knocks came from the wall directly behind us. We knocked 3 times back, then the knocks started coming from what seemed like all of the walls at once. They were much faster and louder this time and seemed to have no pattern as to where they were coming from other than their ternary nature. Just as fast as they came, it all stopped at once. We told his parents, who came into the room and knocked thrice on the wall and got the response echoed back. Back to the night terrors. Since I'd figured out when he was having an episode, I began waking up to his heavy breathing and slight twitching, so I would calmly try to soothe him with a quiet voice, tell him it's okay, and that I was there. He told me that it helped, so I decided to pry a little. I asked him what it was like, and he only told me that the things he used to see were always different when he was younger, but more recently, there was one that was recurring regularly. He wouldn't describe what it looked like, just that it got closer to him every night, and he was afraid of what would happen if it ever got close enough to touch him. He woke up once and told me that it lay down next to him, and he was completely distraught because it was the closest it ever was. But he said it couldn't touch him when I'm around because
it's afraid of you.
I didn't know what he meant by that, but I told him that it should be. That's when I began to notice movement. It started with dresser drawers being open in the mornings or after we left the room. I thought maybe the drawer slides were just wearing out from use and were just popping back open. But it was almost always a different drawer. If I noticed 3 drawers open in the morning, I would just close them and go on about my day, yet different ones than before would be open when I came back. Sometimes they were slightly cracked, and others were pulled all the way to the end. A few times, we caught them opening after we closed them and tried every way we could think of for the possibility that they weren't being closed correctly in the first place, causing them to roll back open. Then one time when my ex was napping, the drawers started to open. I noticed his heavy breathing and panicked REM state, so I tried soothing him with my voice, which seemed to calm him down, but then I noticed an empty pop can by the TV stand starting to rock side to side. It started slowing at first, then began to move so fast it seemed like it was vibrating. As it was getting worse, so was his breathing, so I looked at it and shouted in my mind for it to stop. As soon as I thought about it, they stopped moving, and he was back to a peaceful sleep. I used to be a regular lucid dreamer but have never had sleep paralysis or any sort of experience like this one. The same night as the wobbly can, I was sleeping, curled up on my side and facing down toward the bedroom door, when I saw the entity. It stood in the doorway, taller than the frame with a shadow or misty-looking body and a face whiter than anything I'd seen before. No discernible facial features, just as if the whiteness was light being pulled into or through it, almost like a tunnel. It seemed like I could feel it better than I could see it. It felt like rage. It felt like anger and sadness, stronger than I've ever felt in my life. Before I could make sense of what was happening, I felt myself stand directly up out of my body, point at the creature, and yell at the top of my lungs. I command you, in the name of Jesus Christ, to leave this house! I looked down and saw my ex sleeping beside me, and as quickly as I'd stood up, I fell straight back into my body and into the most peaceful sleep. When I woke up, my ex was sitting and watching TV. I looked at him and asked what the thing looked like from his sleep paralysis, and he told me he didn't want to talk about it, but it would be easier to draw it. He got a notebook and drew exactly what I had seen to the point that I immediately got chills and started crying when he showed it to me. He asked me if I'd seen it, I told him what happened, and neither of us had seen it since, until he came home from the military.
If you're enjoying today's video about stories of our lives, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel to see more videos like this and more. Now, let's get back to the video. Here's a warning to all: don't mess with Ouija boards. Hello. I've been asked a few times to share this story. I apologize for any weird formatting errors as I'm on mobile. In my junior year of high school, I went to a party where the host eventually brought out an Ouija board. I was big into paranormal stuff then, but I didn't know the dangers one of those boards could hold. Typical questions were asked, but it started to get incredibly dark in my vision even though the lights were on. They didn't seem to help at all. The last is, how old will I be when I die? Everyone got traditional numbers, except for me. It just went to 0, then 1, then 0, then 1.
it bounced back and forth between those two numbers until someone just shook the piece and said it was being stupid. At that point I just stopped playing, it weirded me out. Now, I have a pretty good sense of things I can sense and normally see beings or ghosts. He showed up to me during one of my classes, not even a few weeks later. At first, he felt comfort. Like a protector, but I would learn that was not the case. Weird things in our home would happen, drawers opening, whispers, shadows, lights in places where they shouldn't be, books moving. But at night it would be worse, he would stand in front of my door and the fear would just ooze out of him and his form would change. I have no doubt that he was downright evil. I began to deal with this for a couple of years till I met my now husband. We got our first home and things began to escalate. Now keep in mind we had a small rental, about 400 square feet total, so standing in the living area you could see really any point of the house. Footsteps, breathing, and whispers became the norm. At the time, my soon-to-be husband was a practicing Wiccan and had blessed our home. But forgot about the porch and outer walls, we would hear scratches on the walls, and knocking on the door and windows. People had seen my attachment as a shadow and everyone stated he was tall and built like a brick house, that he felt just outright bad and would always go back into the room I was in. My husband had tried to banish him, and it did not go well. You see, my husband worked the closing shift and would get home about 3:30 a.m. There was a road he would have to take that was very haunted as well, with lots of accidents and right next to a good-sized river. One night, he got home, and he was extremely pale and sweating. I knew something happened, but he wouldn't tell me as at the time he didn't want me to worry. After about a week, he finally told me that while driving on that road that night his brakes failed and he couldn't stop. He was going about 60 miles per hour or 100 kilometers per hour, and the wheel began to jerk out of his hands towards the river. He had to use all his strength to keep that car on the road, which was curvy already to begin with, because the wheel was just yanking so hard towards the river. Spoiler alert, the brakes were fine the next day, and the wheel was not having any issues. When he told me this had happened, I finally said that enough was enough. If evil could exist, so could good, and I started taking him with me to a church that my parents were going to. I gave myself to God, told the entity that it was not welcome and needed to leave, and the haunting stopped. For the first time in years, my home was quiet, and it has stayed that way even though I have stopped going to church for the most part. We no longer live in that house, and have even moved out of state, but even our new home is quiet and kind. The only spirit that visits is my fur baby, Solo, whom we said goodbye to last year. From my experience, don't play with Ouija boards, it nearly cost my loved life in the long run.
A mimic copied our voices and we didn't know why. Another post reminded me of something. One summer, my dad was home for a few weeks to piece the roof on one of the buildings on our property. I was in a bad place health-wise, so I was mostly just in the house crocheting and watching scary movies. One day, it was pretty windy. It's usually windy here, but it was rattling the windows and making a lot of noise. Clearly, not a great day to be on the roof. So, my dad had promised that he wouldn't get up on the ladder and just do some other yard work. I had grown tired of whatever I'd been watching, so I had the TV off and was focusing on my crocheting. My dad hadn't been back to the house since lunch, but he had said he would probably just lay in the hammock and read for a bit. I suddenly heard him scream my name. His voice for sure with his unique accent in a terrified tone. My name is Vanessa, so it wasn't something indistinct or easily misheard. I was worried he had gotten on the roof and lost the ladder, and that he was hanging off of the roof and calling to me in terror. So, I ran as fast as I could, straight into him around the back of the house. He has a terrified look on his face, and he was out of breath like he had been running, too. He asked me what was wrong. I said I'd heard him scream my name, so I assumed he was in danger. He said he'd heard me screaming in fear as if I was hurt or in danger. Now, be cool about this, I call my dad Daddy. Anyway, Daddy does not sound anything like Vanessa. Like, at all. And we had both hurried, so it had been at the same time that we had both heard the screams. And in each other's voices. For weeks we tried to debunk this occurrence. We rattled the loose windows, creaked doors, listened to the tree branches when it was windy, etc. Nothing came close. We have had a lot of small spooky things happen on the property before, but this one was obnoxious because of the mimicry of our voices. We can't figure out why it happened. If it was a ghost or demon, oh whatever the heck, what was it trying to accomplish? Was it just pulling a prank? Either way, we still check out any weird crap and don't let this instance of mimicry lead us to assume it's a trick instead of an actual emergency.
I saw a demon dragging a big cage. English is not my first language, so I'm sorry if anything doesn't make sense. 2 years ago, when I was still living with my parents, I woke up in the middle of the night and saw a tall figure beside my bed. Its body and head were extremely black, so I couldn't see the face, but as I remember, it was wearing a long black coat. In his hand, it was dragging a big cage that touched the ground, and the cage was empty. I was sharing the bedroom with my 2 siblings, but they both were sleeping. The demon simply walked away and disappeared. At the moment, I just knew it was a demon, don't know why.
Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed today's video, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel to see more videos about stories of our lives. Click on one of these videos to watch more and see you soon.